Hi, my name is Todd Cook, and since it's that time of year again, I'd like to wish everyone out there a happy holidays and kind of catch you up on some of the things that I've been working on. So as a lot of you know, I was convicted of first-degree murder when I was an 18-year-old kid. It was a result of accidental shooting during the course of a robbery, and it resulted in a life sentence. So currently I've served about 25 years, a little bit more than that, in the Nebraska State Penitentiary. And with my time, I've learned that education is very important. And so part of that is I've joined the Circle of Concerned Lifers organization. And some of the things that we do in that group is that we teach other people restorative justice practices. So today I'd like to take some time to talk to you about life sentences as well as restorative justice. So one of the books I've been reading recently is The Meaning of Life. It's by Mark Maurer and Ashley Nellis. And they go into a case about abolishing life sentences. So I'd like to read from that and give you some specific facts about life sentences. At the start of the prison expansion era, in the early 1970s, a total of 200,000 people were incarcerated in the state and federal prisons. Today, more than that number are serving life sentences, with many effectively condemned to die in prison. So the interesting part about life sentences is that it hasn't always been life means life. And in Nebraska, historically, it was on average 17 years, and a person in my same situation would have been released. So now I've been in over 25, so I'm well past that point. To illustrate that a little further, there's another paragraph I'd like to read. It says, for most of the 20th century, a life sentence in many states typically resulted in 10 or 15 years in prison. Louisiana, which has the nation's highest incarceration rate overall, and holds more than 11,000 individuals serving life without parole, in years past released lifers after 10 years on average. The federal system, which currently holds nearly 7,000 people on a life sentence, previously defined life as 15 years. But since 1987, all life sentences have been imposed with no possibility of parole. Policy choices, not criminal offending patterns, have produced a dramatic expansion in both the number of people serving life imprisonment and the years they must serve before being considered for release. While crime has gone through periods of both growth and decline in the past 4 decades, life sentences have continued to rise throughout this period. So the interesting aspect of that is that even in other states, it's not just in Nebraska, other states used to think that a life sentence was somewhere around 15 calendar years. Internationally, the standards are a little bit different too, but now they're trying to approach this subject and try to solve mass incarceration, and Nebraska has a pretty big overcrowding problem, so they should probably look at some of the things that they're doing as well. But the goal of reducing the scale of life imprisonment will require both policy initiatives to change the sentencing standards and a cultural shift in thinking about how to produce public safety. Elements of such a change have emerged in recent decades, including restorative justice. So I think it's important that the people that are serving life sentences are actually teaching restorative justice practices, and that's why I really like being a part of the Circle of Concerned Lifers organization. Now, speaking of the international terms, I found in here this is a pretty interesting point. The contrast in the imposition of life sentences can be seen in the context of a key decision by the European Court of Human Rights in 2013. In the case of Venter and others versus United Kingdom, the court essentially barred the imposition of life without parole sentences in member nations. Based on the principle that all prisoners should have the right to hope, the decision requires that individuals who have transformed themselves in prison and have atoned for the harm they have caused should be considered for release at some point in their prison term. So internationally, the overall viewpoint is that everybody has a right to hope. And I think it's really critical, because if you don't have any hope, you make bad decisions. And so if we give people an opportunity, I think they'll take it. On the last point I'd like to make in this book is that in recent decades, growing attention has been paid to restorative justice as a means of establishing more constructive consequences for criminal behavior. So that leads us right into the training that the lifers here provide. And this is the big book of restorative justice. It has 4 different volumes in it, and I'm going to be reading from the little book of restorative justice by Howard Zier. So you're going to notice that there's a couple of different viewpoints from criminal justice and restorative justice. I'd like to read a few of those for you. So criminal justice, the views are: crime is a violation of the law in the state. Violations create guilt. Justice requires the state to determine blame or guilt and impose pain or punishment. The central focus is on the offender getting what they deserve. Now listen to the restorative justice aspect of that. It says crime is a violation of people and relationships. Violations create obligations. Justice involves victims, offenders, and community members in an effort to repair the harm, to put things right. The central focus is the victim's needs and the offender's responsibilities for repairing harm. So there's also questions that go into both criminal justice and restorative justice, and here's what I have on that. Criminal justice says, what laws have been broken? Who did it? And what do they deserve? Now restorative justice asks, who has been harmed? What are their needs? Whose obligations are those? So one of the things that you'll notice is restorative justice is really about relationships. It's about how we impact people when we commit crime and how that affects the relationships that they have with not only themselves and other people, but the property. So if you were to break into somebody's house, you affect the relationship that they have with their house and how they feel safe in their environment. So there's different lenses for restorative justice, and restorative justice seeks to provide an alternative framework or lenses for thinking about crime and justice. These principles, the restorative lenses or philosophy can be envisioned around 5 key principles or actions. Number 1, focus on the harms and the consequent needs of those harmed first of all, but also on those of the community and those causing harm. Number 2, address the obligations that result from those harms, obligations of the offending persons as well as those of the community and society. Number 3, use inclusive, collaborative processes. Number 4, involve those with a legitimate stake in the situation, including those victimized, those offending, the community members, and society. Number 5, seek to repair the harm and put right the wrongs to the extent possible. So if we do a little bit of a change in how we see things, we can come up with a different perspective. And so we also go into restorative justice talking about different signposts. And as we begin to think of practical applications of restorative justice, another guide is provided by the following 10 principles or signposts. These principles can be of use in designing or evaluating programs. Like the guiding questions, they may be useful in crafting responses to specific cases or situations. So I'd like to read those to you. Number 1, focus on the harms or wrongdoing rather than the rules that have been broken. Number 2, show equal concern and commitment to those victimized and those who have offended, involving both in the process of justice. Number 3, work towards the restoration of those harmed, empowering them and responding to their needs as they see them. Number 4, support those who have offended while encouraging them to understand, accept, and carry out their obligations. Number 5, recognize that while obligations may be difficult for those who have offended, those obligations should not be intended as harms, and they must be achievable. Number 6, provide opportunities for dialogue, direct or indirect, between those harmed and those who have harmed, as desired by both parties. Number 7, find meaningful ways to involve the community and to respond to the community basis of crime. Number 8, encourage collaboration and reintegration of both those who are harmed and those who harmed, rather than relying upon coercion and isolation. Number 9, give attention to the unintended consequences of actions and programs. And number 10, show respect to all parties, those harmed, those who harmed, their friends and loved ones, and justice colleagues. So it's important if we start to formulate programs around restorative justice that we make sure that everyone, including the person that caused the harm, comes out a better person. We don't want to just ignore the fact that the offender might have been going through some things that caused them to act out. And we also don't want to ignore the fact that the victims obviously need to be taken care of in this situation. So I want to leave you with 10 principles of restorative justice that we might all add some of these into our daily lives. So these are 10 ways to live restoratively. And number 1, take relationships seriously, envisioning yourself in an interconnected web of people, institutions, and the environment. Number 2, try to be aware of the impact, potential as well as actual, of your actions on others and the environment. Number 3, when your actions negatively impact others, take responsibility by acknowledging and seeking to repair the harm, even when you could probably get away with it, avoiding or denying it. Number 4, treat everyone respectfully, even those you don't expect to encounter again, even those you feel don't deserve it, even those who have harmed or offended you or others. Number 5, involve those affected by a decision as much as possible in the decision-making process. Number 6, view the conflicts and harms in your life as opportunities. Number 7, listen deeply and compassionately to others, seeking to understand even if you don't agree with them. Think about who you want to be in the latter situation rather than just being right. Number 8, engage in dialogue with others even when what is being said is difficult, remaining open to learning from them and the encounter. Number 9, be cautious about imposing your truths and views on other people and situations. And number 10, sensitively confront everyday injustices, including sexism, racism, homophobia, and classism. So I understand that restorative justice isn't necessarily what you've been used to, but the criminal justice process needs some help. And I encourage all of you to reach out to the people that make the policies and work with them to try to engage with a better outcome for everybody involved in the criminal process. Now, this is all I really have for you today. I appreciate all the love and support that you guys have provided me over the years. And if it works out for you, reach out to me. I'm at the Nebraska State Penitentiary. You can get on jfa.com and set up an account. But I want to thank you all for your support, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you.